Hello Internet and welcome back to the Story Nook. Today we're going to be continuing Hello, I'm a Witch and My Crush Wants Me to Make a Love Potion, written by Iko Mutsuhana and illustrated by Vient. Reasons we're doing this right now is I'm having really bad depression, like super duper bad depression today. And I'm kind of like suicidal. So, woo. And I don't have interviews until tomorrow because the temp agency's booked up for today. And so, yeah, we are just doing the thing. I went to 2 temp agencies. One has nothing. I'm going to call the other one later. But we're going to start reading the next chapter of this because depression's kicking my ass, y'all. And I would like to not be suicidal for like 5 minutes. But my body is working against me. So we're going to start off with Chapter 2, The Dangerous Apple for Witches. Gigantic columns of clouds soared through the azure sky. Summer was at its peak. The forest had become more vibrant, yet no matter how green the woods turned, the lake maintained an icy bite. Strands of pale pink hair drifted up top the rippling water. As Rose floated on the surface, her chemise spread as if blooming on the lake. For someone who hated bathing, she had taken to the lake quite often these days. Surely it was due to the hot weather. She had no other special reason for it. Since Tien had paid her a visit just the other day, he wasn't likely to come by anytime soon. Besides, even if he or someone else had happened to spot her bathing, she wouldn't even bat an eye or blush. It was the same as being seen by a smug deer. She had informed Harij that there wasn't anything for him to do for another month. He wasn't the type to visit for no reason. And it was noontime anyway. Harij never came to the witch's abode while the sun was up. The month she told him to wait felt long and both long and short. Loneliness from not seeing him and satisfaction from staying in Harij's memories just that much longer worn within. Exhausting, Rose. She was a pro at controlling her emotions, but she didn't know how uncontrollable love could be. Nevertheless, the 1-month period was actually necessary for processing the raw materials. The only reason she told Harij the exact amount of time was that witches couldn't tell a lie. This was why only witches could make potions that were too powerful and potent for human hands to handle. A witch who used the lie of magic could not use lies other than magic. Thus, witches isolated themselves from mankind and lived as a different species. Acting unfriendly and being creepy like creatures that go bump in the night were some of the methods they used to prevent others from discovering they couldn't tell a lie. Rose also imitated the witches from the past and treaded with care in every manner of life as to not to have her own weakness exposed. She kept contact with people to a minimum and meticulously controlled her words and facial expressions. Her baggy robe was critical in preventing people from seeing through what she failed to conceal. That being said, all she had to do was just not lie. Dodging the truth and changing the topic were great alternatives. As luck would have it, Rose had no qualm about doing just that. Following the method thus far was what allowed her to survive alone for years. Guess I should wash my chemise too. With weather this good, it should dry within a few hours. The robe and dress she had just finished washing hung from a rope she tied between 2 trees. Rose swam to shore to add her chemise to the space between them. She shook her drenched body like a wet dog, then untied the chemise strapped at her back, and the fabric fell to her feet. Since the fancy green robe was her only change of clothes, she was stuck waiting for the laundry to dry, naked. After all, she didn't want to dirty her new robe yet. The chemise soaked with water was quite heavy. She folded it several times and squeezed it tight. While she focused on twisting the fabric, water dripped onto it from her hair, adding moisture right back in. Ah, darn it! Chest-length pale pink hair clung to her skin. Everything about this was starting to annoy her. So she unfurled the chemise and shook it out. The water droplets returned to the lake with a lyrical, splishity splash. Entertained, she became enthralled in repeating the same action. I'm drinking some water. She became so distracted that she completely let down her guard. When she heard the bell inside ring to announce visitors, she turned around with the assumption it was the smug deer checking her out again. She made eye contact with the man standing directly across the shore from her. It was such a shock she couldn't breathe. Ridge was here. Rose froze with her unfolded chemise in hand. Ridge, standing on the forest side bank, was also paralyzed as he gaped at her. For a long moment, they both stared at each other, forgetting to breathe. The scene is hilarious for me. Because I remember what it was like getting to it in the manga, and I was just like, ah, funny. Oh yeah, my husband sent me like, hey, our cat's on the screen. I wasn't aware he had put in photos for like the International Pet Day. And I said, haha, they put our boy on the screen, my baby. And then I let him know I have 2 interviews tomorrow, because I currently do not have a job. Because they let me go because I needed to leave early. And they're being kind of like cunts, because I'm just like, y'all don't communicate shit. Y'all, I don't even know what fucking section I belong in, or what my fucking job title is any fucking more. So yeah. Chirp, chirp, chirp. Small forest songbirds sang in their beautiful voices. Ridge wrenched away his gaze first. I'm sorry! He presented her with his back with great speed. From the sound of his voice, she gathered how shaken the usually composed knight was. Rose let out a dry laugh. Her face was surely redder than a tomato. Her heart raced so hard it hurt. She threw her wet chemise on the rope, hid it underneath her robe, and rushed inside the house. Covering her hot face with both hands, she leaned against the front door and slid down to her bottom. The strength left her legs. Did he see me? He saw me. He totally saw me. Saw this pale skin and my unshapely figure without a corset on. Rose couldn't care less if Tien or another client saw her naked, but him? Being seen by him made her feel unbearably ashamed. I can't believe it. I was sure he wouldn't come. I told him it would take a month. And it's daytime! What in the world brought him out here? Rose's brain felt as if it were boiling over. But she remembered that her Ridge was still outside. She couldn't keep him waiting forever. She forced herself into her trembling feet and scrambled over to the closet. She had no choice but to wear the robe from Tien against her bare skin. Nothing felt more uncomfortable than not having anything on underneath. Then she checked her appearance in the water jug. Reflected back at her was a normal woman with misty eyes, flushed pink cheeks, and a goofy expression. Rose gave her cheek a good slap, then she slapped the other cheek as hard as possible. Both stung like hell, but it helped her regain a modicum of calm. She opened the front door and called out across the lake, I apologize for the wait. You may come over now. Ridge, who had kept his back to her like a gentleman until she gave the okay, turned around with his jaw set in a rigid line. There wasn't much distance between her island and the opposite shore, allowing Rose to clearly make out his face. Ridge seemed to have calmed down as well. At least, he was calmer on the surface than Rose felt. Even when he tried desperately to hide his noble upbringing by wearing commoner clothes, some of his graceful behavior still seeped through. Under the bright sky, he was even more dazzling than usual. The fact that Rose could perfectly make him out across the lake proved that he had fully glimpsed her in her immodest lack of attire. Her head felt as if it were going to explode in panic. I would too, honey. Granted, I don't think anyone outside of my family saw me naked until it was like the first night I spent with my husband. Like, we were dating. It was like our first night having sex. I remember that Gabriel Iglesias was on the TV because comedy helps me feel a lot calmer. So that was nice. Thank you, Gabriel, for playing in the background while I had sex for the first time. You were awesome. Oh, shit, I was supposed to go to the gas station and do something with the scratch-off ticket. I will do that once I'm done recording this video for you guys. We'll get to the first scene change. Harij rowed the boat across the lake and tied it to the iron dock cleat. After confirming that the boat was secure, he turned around. Please forgive me for my grave indiscretion. He hadn't done anything wrong, but she could distinguish the depth of his regret from the deep lines in his brow. She couldn't bear to look at him and instead lowered her gaze to the deep forest green robe she wore. I'm naked under the robe. I'm standing in front of him in an outrageous state. Realizing it made all the blood rush to her head, instantly frying her brain. No need to apologize. I simply didn't think you would pay me a visit, Sir Harij. You know who I am? A muscle in Rose's cheek twitched. Uttering the name of a client she kept to her internal thoughts only was a huge mistake she would have never made under normal circumstances. Harij's voice was tight, his apologetic expression was nowhere to be seen, and instead became a stern countenance of a knight. Rose bit her lip in frustration over her blunder. He hadn't once told her his name. She could have been fully aware of that important detail, and yet she foolishly let it slip out. It appeared the upset over being seen naked was still affecting her. Peg gnawed at her thoughts. In her heart, Rose prayed she could regain her sanity. Yes, indeed I do. Since when? Rose turned her head in fear of another slip of the tongue. She couldn't come up with the right words to evade the question. This was the first for her, which only served to further sink her into confusion. Answer me. But she wasn't capable of misleading Harij, who had switched into night mode. Telling the truth was the only option on the table when she lacked the mindset to cleverly talk her way out of it. Since 4 years ago? For that long? Yes? Please spare me. Aha, you fool, stop! Rose wanted to cast a spell on her mouth, but her lips, only capable of telling the truth, tried to find a way out of this situation with words. I never divulge my client's information. I can promise you that. I am in a very unusual situation right now. If you keep asking more questions, I will be forced to come clean about everything. Rose became so panicked she lacked oxygen. Her head spun. She couldn't stop babbling. Huh? What are you talking about? Harij gave her a dubious stare. Rose saw the look in his eyes and was propelled into further inner chaos. This poor, poor child. Ah. After all, she was naked under that single piece of cloth she wore. Witches cannot lie. Such is the price of using magic. Oh no, I'm a failure. I've exposed the witch's greatest secret that is never to be spoken of. Rose turned around and banged her head against the wall. She couldn't come up with a better idea to silence her panic. Hey! Harij was confused by the sudden drastic change in Rose's behavior caused by his questionings. Please don't ask. I truly am sorry, she confessed breathlessly, no longer slamming her head against the wall. Her forehead turned bright red where she had been hitting it repeatedly, and it was covered in small scratches. If Harij kept querying her, Rose would definitely reveal all her secrets without leaving anything out. She couldn't let that happen. She felt guilty toward all the other witches for exposing their weakness. But what was done was done. They would just have to protect themselves in the unlikely event the Harij spread their secrets. Witches were capable of doing so. They could absolutely look after themselves. Rose strongly believed that. For that reason, Rose was far more frightened of Harij discovering her feelings than the witch's deepest secret. She would rather die than suffer the miserable plight of him, the strong, handsome nobleman blessed by the sun, discovering that she, a mere witch who was neither a noble woman, a beauty, or a village girl, loved him. That's right. It was such an obvious fact, it nearly escaped Rose's mind that she was a witch. Witches specialized in potion making, and potions were used for more than just healing. One of their many uses was poison. Eyes reddened from her crazed mental state, Rose rushed back to the back of the Hermitage and ransacked all the small vials on the shelf. The glass vials collided with each other, loudly clanging and clinking. She snatched up the potion she sought, one that could bring down the biggest ox in a matter of seconds. Rose was putting pressure in her fingers to pop the cork when her rage hugged her from behind. "What are you doing?" Rather than a hug, it was more accurate to say she was being restrained from behind. Her rage swiftly snatched the vial away from Rose, the same way he might confiscate the murder weapon from a culprit. It happened so fast, the momentum knocked Rose to the ground. In the process, her robe spread open, exposing her bare thigh. With a flurry, she pulled the rope back in place. "I'm not trying to put on a show here. I may be a witch, but I'm not a slut. Most of my earnings go towards ingredients for the next potion, and I don't care about fashion. That's why I don't have a change of clothes." "I understand. Just wait before you do anything foolish," Harridge said to calm her, a hint of exasperation on his face. "I'm sorry, truly. I can see that you are far more disturbed by what happened than you appear, Lady Witch." He placed Rose's poison vial on the workbench. Then he offered his gloveless hand to her, where she was still crouched on the floor. Rose stiffened with her eyes locked on that hand. Ew. I lost my place because I answered a message. Her eyes were locked on her hand. Okay, here we go. How long had it been since someone last reached out to her? She was positive it had happened while her grandmother was still alive, but it was so long ago she couldn't remember. Harridge didn't scorn her for being too scared to take his hand. On the contrary, he gently put an arm around her shoulders, helped her to her feet, and escorted her to a chair as he might a noblewoman. He knelt down on one knee before the witch, whose head was spinning too hard to keep up with what was happening. He, Harridge Sim, the man Rose had been crushing on for 4 long years, was kneeling before her, a mere witch. An even worse wave of dizziness crashed over her. "I apologize for exposing a secret that would make you choose death, Lady Witch. I swear on my honor as a knight that I will take it to the grave with me. You have my solemn oath. Please believe me." In response, Rose could only manage to nod her head like a broken doll. She didn't take the pure and humble path of correcting his misunderstanding. Instead, she gripped her hands in front of her robe, making it look as if she was trying to keep the two sides together. "How did you know that the potion I tried to take was poison?" "I didn't know what the vial contained, but I recognized the look in your eyes. Concerned suspects usually share the same look when they are about to attempt a risky escape. I'm glad I made it in time." Harridge exhaled a great sigh of relief. Realizing he cared just as much about the life of a mere witch made Rose fall head over heels for him all over again. Because who isn't going to go, swoon, over a man who's going to keep you from committing suicide? As her gaze stayed plastered on him, Harridge stood with a weary smile. Then he went outside, only to return with a basket a moment later. "I'd have no choice but to finish this all on my own if I hadn't." The basket was full of bread. Moreover, it looked soft. It looked like soft white bread. "You don't eat much, right? You are a young lady. You need more meat on your bones, especially since you handle potions. Potion making is fraught with danger as it is. You won't last long if you fall ill, thin as you are." No way. Did he go out of his way to come during the day just for that? I can't believe it. Rose looked from the bread to her ridge. "Thank you." Also, swoon. A trembling heart and aching chest. Rose didn't know how to describe the way she felt. Fulfillment spread through her. Her heart raced so hard as she couldn't breathe, and she wanted to cling to him and cry. He's worried about me. That meant, for even the briefest moment, he thought about her. She had been in his thoughts just enough that when he saw bread in the market, he decided to buy it for Rose, even though she wasn't with him. Oh, so this is joy. Rose tasted the emotion for the first time. She was unbelievably happy that the person she loved went out of his way for her. Will I remain in his memories? Will he think back on the strange witch who only ever ate lettuce? Rose needed nothing more than for him to think of her even once the next time he saw lettuce. It looks delicious. She accepted the basket from him and could feel the bread was still a little warm. She had eaten bread while her grandmother was still alive and during her occasional visits to the capital. But this was the first time she had seen such soft-looking bread. A lump formed in her chest and throat, and tears misted her eyes. In contrast, Courage raised a skeptical eyebrow. Wait, you plan to eat here? Yes. Why wouldn't I? Courage stopped Rose as she was about to pick up a piece of bread from the basket and she had placed on top of her lap. Clean off this table first. He pointed to the table crammed with a mess of haphazardly piled junk. The lettuce from God knows when was left out to die again. Pointing out her messy living space wasn't meant to give her the peace of mind that it did. Rose felt like as if she had finally regained a semblance of her normal self. This is why nobles make poor guests. I can hear you. You're meant to. Rose wrestled with the mountain of odds and ends until the table was clean. Courage then spread out a tablecloth. Why, the elite knight had even brought that. He had likely suspected that the one belonging on this table was buried somewhere amid the dirt and clutter. Though Rose was loath to admit it, he was right on the money. The iron tablecloth was tasteful but simple, and it fit nicely in the witch's small hermitage. Sunlight shining through the small window fell upon the quaint table set. Where is the bread knife? Will a kitchen knife do? It will. Rose expressed her thanks for his lenience on her lack of knife choices and selected the cleanest knife from her workbench. I also bought butter. I have spoons for measuring ingredients. She returned with a small cutting board and a wooden spoon and took her seat. Courage, the man she had pined after for 4 years, sat directly across from her. Rose blinked 3 times to make sure he wasn't a figment of her imagination. He didn't vanish. She wasn't daydreaming. 4 years ago, or rather up until this afternoon, she never dreamt this day would come. This is an unusual butter. Supposedly it's apple butter. I heard it tastes good on bread. Fascinating. I love apples, so I can't wait to try it. Thick and creamy butter filled the small jar he placed on the table. It was much thicker than the butter Rose used for potions. While Rose curiously examined the jar, Courage sliced the bread. He took a huge helping of apple butter with the wooden spoon and spread it on the slice. Apple pieces could be seen in the juicy butter glaze. Rose's mouth watered and she swallowed in anticipation. Here. Thank you. With both hands, she picked up the slice he placed on the plate. It was several times softer than she had imagined. All this time, she had only ever eaten hard bread, the kind that usually had to be dipped in soup. This bread's softness almost made it slip from her grasp. The butter sparkled in the sunlight, and the sweet scent of apple tickled her nose. She took a bite and swallowed. Rose's eyes widened in surprise. She followed with another big bite. The second bite was just as impactful. It was that delicious! Soft, fluffy bread filled her mouth. It was not only soft, but chewy. This was Rose's first time experiencing such a mysterious texture, and the apple butter exceeded her expectations. The consistency of the smashed apples was as good as the milky butter. The rich apple and butter flavors married into a heavenly deliciousness. Rose lost herself in scarfing it down. Courage watched with a mixture of emotions as Rose devoured the bread with such intensity it seemed she'd forgotten about the guests sitting across from her. Thinking back, today was truly a chaotic day for him. A member of the Assim family had been recorded in the noble family directory as supporters of the kingdom of Marjan for generations. Born as the third son of a count, Courage was knighted at the age of 20. His primary duty as a royal knight was guarding Princess Beloria. Beloria was still young enough to be called a girl, but she had all the traits of a wonderful princess: an admirable personality, a charitable heart, decorum, and unending generosity. Hold on. He was knighted at 20. Rose seems pretty young, but I don't know how old Rose is. So now I have an age relationship conundrum. What is y'all's age difference? Like, if Rose is 18 currently at the time of y'all, like, meeting, and you've been knighted for, like, at least 4 years, probably 5, you would be about 25. I'm still a little, like, it's kind of, like, it's legal, but I'm a little sketch on it, you know? So I'm just like, how old is Rose? But yeah. Balora's other brother, the second prince, was also Haridge's childhood friend. Because Haridge had known Baloria since she was a little girl, he treated her like a younger sister, even though he knew it was presumptuous of him. Balora also relied on Haridge as though he were really her older brother, but she never once demanded anything of him or acted spoiled. Until that day. I beg you, Haridge, this is the only thing I will ever ask of you. Please do me this favor, not as a knight serving his princess's orders, but as a favor for the girl Laura, who adores you like a brother. Ballora pleaded with him in the voice of a broken-hearted girl while the determination of a nation's princess gleamed in her eyes. Please attain a love potion for me. That kind of potion only distorts a person's mind and manipulates future actions, both against the drinker's will. Haridge was absolutely against it, however, he also couldn't reject such a heartfelt request from Ballora, who until now had never once asked him for even the smallest of favors. Visiting the witch as a knight in direct service of Princess Ballora risked scandalizing her name. Thus, Haridge paid the witch a clandestine visit. The witch's dwelling place was said to be hidden deep within the forest, the exact location a mystery. After losing his way more times than he would like to admit, Haridge arrived at the hovel that looked as if it would be blown right off its foundation during a windstorm. This was the witch's hermitage, and the first witch he had ever met lived in a room that was shockingly dark and dirty. She always hid under a baggy old robe, and he sent him away on awfully questionable fetch quests. As time passed, his suspicion of the witch escalated. There was no common ground between this upright knight who lived for justice and the witch who was entirely shrouded in darkness. That was why he had been greatly surprised to see the witch surface from the water. He thought he had stumbled across a fairy living in the lake. The sight of her was too surreal. Oh, Haridge is swooning, y'all. Well, he's beginning to swoon. Kinda, sorta. He assumed she didn't venture into the sunlight much. From her pure white skin was as beautiful as snow. The court noble women who dusted their faces with white powder to achieve a similar look would surely be jealous. Try as he might, Haridge couldn't tear his gaze from her and the water droplets sparkling off her pale pink tresses. He hadn't thought she was an old woman, but he never imagined she was a young lady either. It never even occurred to Haridge that a woman this young would be living out here alone. By the time Haridge put two and two together and realized it wasn't a fairy, but the witch, she noticed his presence. Her dark green eyes, which usually stayed hidden beneath the shadow of the hood, had widened. Haridge sincerely regretted his actions. He had been too stunned by the sight of her that he failed to look away and ended up with a clear view of her naked body. Without realizing it, it would so unsettle the always composed witch that she chose to take her own life with poison rather than face him. On the bright side, the incident taught Haridge a lot. He learned the witch was a young woman, and that witches were incapable of lying in spite of how suspicious they appeared. All those unreasonable, merciless tasks she gave weren't to get rid of him, but were necessary for the potion. He thought all this time that she was ripping him off, when it turned out she could hardly afford to have a dress made because the majority of her asking price went to materials. He discovered that the witch he could never get a good read on was actually a normal woman capable of embarrassment. And lastly, he learned that she was very fond of bread spread with apple butter. Do you live here alone, Lady Witch? When he bought the freshly baked bread in the city, it was actually because he was afraid the thin witch would die from starvation before finishing the potion. Haridge has a very kind heart. She wasn't on the brink of death, of course, but seeing her apple-colored cheeks stuffed with bread, he knew he made the right choice. He should take his leave soon, given her present attire, but the recent memory of how she curled in on herself, prepared to take her own life in a bout of depression, made him fear she might truly die if he left her alone right now. He was relieved she enjoyed the bread he rushed outside to get for her. Showing poor table manners, the witch licked the apple butter off her fingers and stared at Haridge. Yes, I live alone. Isn't that too dangerous? It was already risky enough for anyone to live alone, and those dangers multiplied for young women. While there may not be many crooks willing to sneak into a shady old witch's abode, there was an endless supply of scoundrels ready to steal inside a beautiful young lady's home. The witch blinked at him as if to inquire why he would ask such a question at this juncture. He couldn't very well admit that he had the wrong idea about her age all this time, so Ridge clearly chose silence. Well, it can be, but I avoid the danger by keeping to myself. And I don't get many visitors. Whenever someone questionable comes by, I immediately hide in the cellar under the floorboards. With the way she spoke, he gathered she had experienced that quite often. Imagining the witch waiting, shivering in the dark under the floorboards for some scoundrel to leave, was cause for great concern. You have been living like this all along? Yes, my entire life, the witch said without inflection. She spoke as if it were only natural, being alone and looking out for herself, as if it was a fact that didn't need mentioning. It worried her Ridge, but he couldn't find the right words to say in response. It just wasn't proper. A young lady deserved to be kept safe by someone rather than whether that be her guardian or by their guardian preparing a dowry and marrying them off. Women should be protected. Ridge was raised with that belief, as most noble men were. Yet even if he held such a belief, what could he say as someone who was neither involved with nor responsible for her? Ridge did the one thing he could and smeared apple butter on the second slice of bread and placed it in front of the witch. This time, he applied double the amount. And we're at that scene. We're at 30 minutes, which is super duper cool. On page 42. I'm going to take you back up here to the cover so you all can see this beautiful cover once again. And thank you all so very much for being here, for listening to me read these stories. Let me know if there's any other web novels you want me to read, light novels. Send me your own fan fictions too. I would love to read those. I am probably going to be... I'm working on writing my own short stories, so I might be reading some of those eventually off the Word doc, so that formatting might look a little funny. Let me know if there's any kind of Reddit thread y'all want me to read. Send all the stuff y'all want me to read. It would be awesome and super duper cool. So yeah, y'all have a lovely day. Stay safe. Be awesome. Remember to stay hydrated, drink water. I am currently dealing with hella depression, so help me not worry so much about my bills. I have a Redbubble, I have a Ko-fi, I have a Patreon. You can commission me on Patreon. Well, you can commission me on Ko-fi. You can buy my stickers on Redbubble. Patreon, you can see stuff early that I'm working on. You guys get access to all that stuff and whips and all that. And if I'm able to afford, eventually I'm going to be getting some nice letters, and I'll be printing out postcards to mail to Patreon supporters, and we're going to see how shipping and stuff works. I'm going to do a test run probably with my friend who's my only Patreon supporter. So yeah, thank you all so much for being here. Have a lovely day. You're all awesome. And this was chapter 2, part 1 of Hello, I'm a Witch and my crush wants me to make a love potion. So yeah, bye bye.